Good morning. This morning I was reading Autobiography of a Yogi. What a gift. Our Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, who we lovingly call Master, has given us in this book. And you can hardly open a page without finding some information or story or miracle about Lahiri Mahasaya. And so I sort of started at the beginning this morning and was thumbing through some pages and just thought I would probably retell a couple of the stories that many of you already know, but they're so lovingly part of this path and the story of Lahiri Mahasaya. As we know, already on page 8, when Yogananda's father, who is a manager of a bank, refuses to give leave to his co-worker or his employee, who happens to be a disciple of Lahiri Mahasaya. And the disciple is heartsick that he can't go to Benares to see his guru. And while they're walking home together, Master's father and this employee, they stopped and admired the sun on a wheat field, and suddenly Lahiri Mahasaya materializes himself and says to Yogananda's father, "You're being too hard on your employee." And then, just then, Master's father said, "If you can, summon your guru like this, let me please go with you to visit him in Benares." So then Master's father and mother go to Benares with the employee and become lifelong disciples of Lahiri Mahasaya, and they get initiated into Kriya Yoga. And therefore, Lahiri's picture was on the family altar when Yogananda was growing up, when our guru was growing up. And Master would say he would sit in front of that picture and meditate and look at this picture of Lahiri. And he said Lahiri would come out of the picture, his form would come out of the picture and sit down right in front of him and meditate with him. And Master said, as soon as he would reach forward to touch the feet of Lahiri, he would go back into the photo frame. And it was the same picture of Lahiri that also healed our guru of Asiatic cholera after the doctors had said there's nothing more we can do for him. This was when Master was quite young. I think he was 8 years old. And he was in the hospital, and the doctor said there's nothing else we can do. Yogananda's mother brought the picture to Master and said, "Bow inwardly. I know you don't even have the strength to physically bow, but just bow inwardly at Lahiri's feet." And suddenly a flash of bright light came into our guru's body and filled the room and instantly healed him of this fatal disease. At that time, it was a fatal disease. And it was Master's mother's faith that drew this power of Lahiri to Master to heal him. And so those are some of the stories that Yogananda had at an early age. And Lahiri Mahasaya was also the guru of great disciples. One of them is Swami Pranabananda, who in Autobiography of a Yogi, Master calls the saint with two bodies, because Yogananda's father had sent our guru to Benares to deliver a message to a man that he didn't know, but he said, "Go to my guru by Swami Pranabananda's house, and he will lead you to this man to give this message." And so as our young guru arrived at this Swami Pranabananda's house, Swami Pranabananda already knew who Master was, that he was Bhagavati's son, and said, "Welcome. I have already begun the process of summoning the man that you need to see." And Master was surprised because he hadn't even given him the notes yet saying who he was he needed to see. And so then Swami Pranabananda sat down and went into meditation. And Master was a little startled by this because the Swami just stopped talking and went into meditation. And at the same time, the man that Yoganandaji needed to see was bathing in the Ghat, And Swami Pranabananda appeared to him and said, please come to my house. There's a boy waiting for you. He has a message from you, from his father. And so the man said, fine, I'm happy to go with you to your house. Let's walk together to your house. And he said, suddenly Swami Pranabananda started walking very, very quickly, and he just lost sight of him. And so the man, when he was climbing up the stairs to the house, ran into Yogananda. And Yogananda said, how did you know to come see me? And the man said, well, the Swami Pranabananda just came down to the ghat to get me. He said, no, he's been sitting here in meditation the entire time. So this is how Master has given Swami Pranabananda the name of the Swami with two bodies. But this was the caliber of Lahiri Mahasaya's disciples. And Yogananda was saying, my goodness, what kind of consciousness must Lahiri have had to have this kind of Swami as his disciple? And then there was Swami Kebalananda, was also a disciple who was a well-known scholar of ancient Vedic texts, and he became Master's Sanskrit tutor. And I just wanted to read these words of what Swami Kebalananda said about his guru, Lahiri Mahasaya. He says, an undescribable peace blossomed within me at the Master's glance. I was permeated with his fragrance as though from a lotus of infinity. To be with him, even without exchanging a word for days, was experience that changed my entire being. If any invisible barrier rose in the path of my concentration, I would meditate at the Guru's feet. There, the most tenuous states came easily within my grasp. The Master was a living temple of God whose secret doors were open to all disciples through devotion. And during that time, Lahiri Mahasaya was also training his disciples how to interpret the scriptures. And if somebody asked a question about one of the ancient texts, Lahiri said, I will undergo those states and presently tell you what I perceive. He was thus diametrically unlike the teachers who commit scripture to memory and give forth unrealized abstractions. Lahiri said, no matter what the disciple's problem, the Guru advised Kriya Yoga for its solution. Continue ceaselessly on your path to liberation through Kriya, whose power lies in practice. And Swami Kebalananda said, through Kriya, the omnipotent God, hidden in all men, became visibly incarnated in the flesh of Lahiri Mahasaya and a number of his disciples. And Lahiri Mahasaya was also the guru of Swami Keshavananda. And Keshavananda told of stories when both he and Lahiri Mahasaya were up in the high Himalayas with Babaji and his troop when miracles took place. And some of the most popular stories about Lahiri Mahasaya have to do with Lahiri meeting Babaji in the Himalayas. And we know the story of Lahiri being a government accountant transferred to Raniket. One day he's wandering in the hills and he hears his voice being called, and he follows that voice. And eventually, after a lot of walking uphill and climbing, he finds Babaji there. And Babaji says, Lahiri, do you remember me? And Babaji says, no. And then, Babaji said, Lahiri, do you remember me? And Lahiri says, no. And Babaji touches Lahiri on the forehead. And suddenly the memory of his last lifetime of being a yogi, living in a cave in Himalayas, came back to him, and Babaji as his guru. So it's such a beautiful account in the Autobiography. And when I think of that story, I think of, don't we all have that yearning and that wish that God calls us, that the Guru calls us, and that we can wander and find that self-realized Guru, and that he'll just touch us on the forehead and we will become awakened. in spiritual understanding. And isn't that sort of what has happened to us in our life? We were just going along with our daily routine, and somehow there was a deeper longing. And the Guru called us in one way or another. Perhaps he came through the autobiography of a yogi, or came through a meditation class, or came through an encounter with a saint. But suddenly, we know we were called. And slowly, slowly, we are walking up that mountain of self-realization with our devotion, with our love, with our longing and calling for a guru, for a master, for our line of gurus to awaken in us realization. One of the other themes that runs throughout the autobiography of a yogi is the theme of initiation. Lahiri goes to the Himalayas and Babaji initiates him into Kriya Yoga. And again, with this touch, Lahiri remembers his lives. He's given Kriya Yoga. And Lahiri, though such a great avatar, he plays the simple, humble disciple, devotee of Babaji. And I think that theme of initiation throughout this path of Kriya Yoga is that of the disciple, of being open to receive the consciousness of the Guru, of being open to attune ourselves to their wisdom, to their love, to their instruction, to their guidance of how we can become like them. Because only as humble devotees, as humble disciples, can we receive the power that they want to give us. And so then Babaji gives Lahiri the technique of Kriya Yoga. And that's what the gurus do. They give us this great gift. But they can take us this far. They can awaken us with their touch. We can bow devotedly at their feet. And as they give us this tool of Kriya Yoga, now we're holding that tool. What are we going to do with it? We can achieve their greatness only through practice, only through their instruction of you need to practice Kriya Yoga. This is our spiritual responsibility. This is what self-realization means. Without our own self-discipline, without walking the path ourselves, we can never become as great as Lahiri Mahasaya has become. And so he has given us the key. So after receiving Kriya from Babaji and being with Babaji and his troupe for a week, he's in bliss, he's in samadhi. And Lahiri says, I just want to stay here with you. And Babaji says, no, you must go back to Benares. You have responsibilities. You're a father, you're a husband, you have a job. And it's not an accident that I give it to you now, that you take it back into the marketplace. The time has come for Kriya to be introduced into the modern age. And so Lahiri was that vehicle. That's why we call him Yoga Avatar, of bringing Kriya Yoga back to this age. But Lahiri does another wonderful thing for us, because Babaji says, give this initiation to all of those who have renounced the world for God. And Lahiri says, it won't be easy for people to renounce the world for God if they can't practice Kriya Yoga. Please let me give it to anyone who sincerely is seeking God. And Babaji said, through your words, the divine wish has been spoken. And so therefore we all have the ability to receive Kriya Yoga, even though we're householders living in the city with responsibilities. And so let's think of Lahiri back in Benares, very quietly teaching Kriya Yoga to his disciples. He wouldn't let his disciples create an organization. He wouldn't let his disciples talk about him as a master, or even tell each other who was the ones receiving Kriya Yoga initiation. He was just planting the seeds within his disciples, who would soon disseminate that sacred knowledge to their own disciples. And Trilanga Swami, who was a very revered saint in Benares at the time, was one day honoring Lahiri Mahasaya, and one of his disciples said, why are you honoring this household? You're a great renunciate and a Swami. And Trilanga Swami said the words, Lahiri Mahasaya is like a divine kitten remaining wherever the Cosmic Mother has placed him. While dutifully playing the part of the worldly man, he has received that perfect self-realization for which I have renounced even my loincloth. Lahiri Mahasaya also gave a prediction to Swami Sri Yukteswar, another one of his great disciples. And he said, 50 years after my passing, a book will be written about me. Because of the interest of yoga in the West. And through this book, world brotherhood will come, and the teachings of God realization and how to honor our one Father will be taught around the world. So let's honor this great, humble disciple of Babaji. And whenever we think that being important is what we're trying to achieve, or being successful is what we're trying to achieve, let's remember the inner renunciation of Lahiri Mahasaya, and remember to put God first in our lives, and know that seeking Him is true inner renunciation, and that is what we can do with our lives and become like Lahiri Mahasaya. And now I'm very pleased to say that Amit is going to say some words also. So Amit.
Thank you, Daya, for that beautiful, beautiful, inspirational talk. And as she mentioned, she started saying that how many gifts that we have all received. And she talked about Autobiography of Yogi. And then also she mentioned towards the end, when Lahiri Mahasaya himself intervened to Babaji about, don't make such a strong, rigid constraint that people have to leave everything before they can receive Kriya Yoga initiation. I feel the part of it is also the need of the time, as we see around. There's hunger in people also, and then not just those who wear a particular colored clothes or traditional renunciates, as we all know of, but even, for that matter, people like you and me, those who are so-called part of this world, also have the same hunger. And in some ways that meeting between Babaji and Lahiri Mahasaya was an answer to all of our prayers, I may say like that, to bring something which is going to introduce ourselves a particular dimension of life. I think we can go back to our own lives when we weren't yet introduced to these teachings or any practices or Kriya Yoga for that matter. And you can see it wasn't like the life was terrible or anything like that. But after now we have these teachings, all of a sudden a beautiful dimension gets added to this life, isn't it? And that's the power of these techniques. And at this particular age also, Lahiri Mahasaya's entire life, again, his entire life is not very relatable, but still, as Daya was talking about, he was part of the world, doing all worldly responsibilities as well. And in the midst of that, he was still practicing everything. So in some ways, to look at our teachings is not like these are not world rejecting. Like in the traditional sense, they say you need to go and then close your door and go into the cave and then just meditate and then stop all the distraction. Anything in the world is a distraction. But more, this is, as Swamiji also uses this word, it is world embracing way of renunciation, or even the path is world embracing, meaning as we practice, we just look at life even more deeply. We touch the life even more deeply. And that is what they brought us to us with those techniques and their teachings as well. Lahiri Mahasaya, as she was talking, he had lots of disciples. Around, I don't know, thousands of good disciples. Good meaning not that others are bad, but meaning those who also became themselves further teachers, and then through them a lot more people also found their way to Kriya Yoga. But Lahiri Mahasaya always had some very particular instructions to all of them, meaning for some he would encourage to do a lot more Mahamudras. For those who who have received Kriya Yoga initiation, you know I'm talking about just one of another technique. But For some of them, he would say, do a lot of Jyoti mudras. For some of them, he would say a lot more Kriyas. For some of them, he would also say a pure Kriyas, but with more intensity. So his guidance, though the technique and then the tools shared was pretty much generic, the practice of it was very customized, if I may use that word like that. And that is also something very interesting for all of us to remember. We all are Guru Bhais, where our Guru is common, our teaching that we try to tune in and practice is also common, but within that, we all have our individual path, individual journey to follow. And then that's what, as I was talking about, it's like we have to tune in. What's our responsibility is ask, what is it precisely that Lahiri Mahasaya or God in that context wants us, which is the expression that he wants through us. Even in our practice, what is the way that he wants us to continue and progress. And this, as she also mentioned, one more thing, which is he said that whenever the disciples would come or any devotee would come and ask him about situations that are troubling with their life and whatnot, he would always answer them like, yeah, solve all your problems with Kriya Yoga. And there is something very beautiful and very important for all of us to consider and then think what that actually means. That's this. Of course, he was not necessarily just saying, yeah, if there's any problem in your life situation, just stop that situation, go sit on your meditation or wherever you can sit and start practicing Kriya. That could be one way, yes. But what is it? And again, Kriya Yoga, what does it do? What does it do is, again, this is a tool that has been given to us to basically know ourselves better. One term that Yogananda always calls, and then we use that especially in the guided meditations or level 1s and 2s, is use this term called portable paradise. Something which is there within ourselves all the time. In our meditation, we try to tune into that space, but the key here, it is all the time there. We also talk about the mruga, Kasturi mruga. That's also an analogy you probably have heard many times, that he just runs around trying to find out where is this fragrance coming from and not believing in quite some time that it can be coming from his own navel center. But he just keeps running around and at times actually just gets into an accident. But paying attention to that, it can be coming from your own presence. She mentioned that Lahiri Mahasaya didn't accept that they're my disciples or being called himself as a guru. And so did our master also said, like, yeah, don't call me a guru. He always pointed finger at God. And not just out of the humility, because they also wanted us to experience that divinity within ourselves, and put more and more faith within ourselves. The portable paradise is not something there in sense. It is not something that will be granted to us at one point in time, but every individual being carries that portable paradise within ourselves. And then the moment our sort of mind gets it, and then all of a sudden our searchlight becomes turned inside. Yogananda ji also said one more thing, which is like longer meditations is essential. And why did he say that? He said it is because still longer and deeper, And he said, like, why is deeper important? He said deeper is important because still the mind gets used to the depth of that meditation. The longers will not be as easy. So the depth meaning what? And that's where when we talk about spiritual experiences or something like that, you sit and then you feel something. And those experiences are essential and granted by our Guru's grace, primarily our mind, so that they know there is something. Those are the moments of awakening. This is a term Daya used also. And every time, and we know that that portable paradise exists within ourselves, every time when we make an attempt and we touch it, that's the moment of awakening. And we all, to a certain extent or the other, know this for reality, isn't it? It is our reality. And now the task, he says, like whenever, what is the life problems, what are the challenges, is when instead of remaining what our true self is, all of a sudden we get pulled in by our tendencies, by our desires, by our vrittis and whatnot. And all of a sudden he says, ki, there is no point, I'm not going to talk to your problems anymore because you have lost your position. And he says, practice Kriya Yoga. Because many a times when we close our eyes, we see there's a lot of commotion going on inside our head, lots of thoughts, everything. There's so many talks going on, and we participate in those talks. And in somewhere in that commotion, Master, God is also trying to say something, or maybe not say something. Either of that, but then it feels very disturbing at times. It's like practice Kriya Yoga. Why? Because he gave us a tool by which we can actually just stop all this commotion and again go back to that portable paradise, that space of freedom which we always carry within ourselves. And because the moment we are there, even those things which were just seeming very traumatic or confusing and difficult, they fall in proper space. It won't disappear, but we get an understanding, an insight of what is trying to happen. And this is his invitation. This is why he brought the techniques and then Kriya Yoga, because this is actually the need of the age. And in some ways, we as his disciples, it's our responsibility to use those techniques, to use those tools, to use these teachings, to do what? To affirm that freedom, not just mentally, but to our extent, be there. And as we look around, especially at this time, there's a time of a little confusion. There's a lot, everybody is trying their bit to support humanity at large. And then I think we, wherever God has placed us in our jobs and in our positions, we are probably also doing it in that sense. But as devotee, what could be our contribution? And that is, again, that is where we bring these teachings alive. You see, the moment we are free, the moment we affirm even a moment of freedom, it from that space when we have something to offer to the world. We practice our teaching and then we say, this teaching, when I practice, I will achieve freedom. Is this one way to look at it? But if you are free and through that freedom, when you practice this teaching, it is like Buddha walking, and wherever he walks, there is peace. Wherever Master walks, there is joy. So the walk is not necessarily to get joy, but walk is in joy, walk is in order to spread joy. And that's something we can all do, and actually we must do. And that could be our gift. We have received far too many gifts from our masters, isn't it? And I think this is on these birthdays, I think we do give gifts to our masters, and the special days like yesterday was his Mahasamadhi. All these times as we remember, we could make a self-commitment to just invite that presence, to be in that presence more and more, against our preferences, against our tendencies at times, to the extent that we can. And then, whatever life demands from that space, we keep doing. But anything, when we are at that space, anything that we do will have that texture, will be spreading, as we say in our prayers, spreading their consciousness, their joy. And that, as devotees, could be our greatest gift to our beloved